This is Charlie Rose.
Bernard Slink's New York Times bestseller, The Reader, caused an international sensation when it was published in 1995. It tells the story of a young German boy in 1947 and his affair with an older woman who turns out to have been a Nazi. The novel raised hard questions regarding the nature of love, guilt, and forgiveness. Here is the trailer for the film.
Why don't you start by being honest with me?
I've never told anyone.
Maybe you should.
When I was young, I had an affair.
She was a friend of yours?
A kind of friend. She liked being read to.
You never tell me what you've been studying.
I'm studying a play. You can read it.
I'd rather listen to you.
Sing to me of the man, Muse, the man of
Twists and turns, driven time and again off course.
Why do you leave early?
He always leaves early.
The affair only lasted a summer.
I can't live without you. Even the thought of it kills me. Do you love me? Excuse me, I'm looking for Hannah Schmitz.
Schmitz is left.
Left? Did she say where she was going?
Silence in the court.
Nazi!
I'm going to take these cases one by one.
My name is Hannah Schmitz.
You joined the SS in 1943.
They were looking for guards.
I was a law student. I remember very clearly.
Societies think they operate by morality, but they don't.
Each of the guards would choose a certain number of women. In the evening, Hannah Schmitz asked them to join her. She was making these women read aloud to her.
You keep telling us to think like lawyers. What are we trying to do?
We are trying to understand.
Look at that woman.
Which woman?
The woman you're always staring at.
I don't know which woman you mean.
Did she acknowledge the effect she had had on your life?
She had done much worse to other people.
You were picking women out and saying you and you and you have to be sent back to be killed.
No, no.
Have you spent much time thinking about the past?
It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I feel. The dead are still dead.
How wrong can you be?
Joining me now is the film's director, Stephen Daldry. Also joining me, his friend and writer, David Hare. They worked together in the Oscar-nominated The Hours in 2002. Also here, actors Kate Winslet and David Kross. Both are receiving attention for their nuanced performances. I'm glad to have all of them here to talk about this movie that has so many people talking. Welcome. Great to have you here. I guess, Stephen, tell me the story.
It's a story of a young boy growing up in post-war Germany who accidentally comes across a lady when he's walking home from school. He gets sick, and a lady helps him. And once he's recovered from his sickness, he goes to thank her, and they start a very intimate relationship. She's much older than he is.
He's a teenager.
He's a schoolboy. And it's a very complicated, very sort of very warm relationship as well as complicated and then one day she disappears. But one of the key things to the story is that what she really likes him to do is to get him to read to her, which he does and goes through many great books. Anyway, one day she disappears, and then many years later, maybe 4 years later, he's at university at Heidelberg Law School, and he, as part of his coursework, he goes to attend a trial in a local town, a nearby town, and comes across her again. But this time she's a defendant in a courtroom, and she's on trial for war crimes. Is basically the starting point of the story. The book and the film trace Michael's journey as he continues, finds different revelations about her during the trial, about what she was involved in and a particular secret that he didn't understand. There's a series of shocks, narrative shocks to him, including the fact that she used to get girls to read to her when she was working as a guard at Auschwitz. And then in later life, when we pick up the story again now in the 70s and the 80s in Berlin, when he's an older man, he sends her tapes, he sends her books, he still records novels to her. And in this later period of his life, this woman called Hannah Schmitz learns to read and write, and eventually, after 20 years, when she's let out of jail, they have a final reunion, after which Hannah Schmitz kills herself.
Was it difficult to adapt this to a screenplay?
Yes, very difficult, because it's a novel that really is about what's going on. It's a first-person narrative. It's told by Michael in the book, and of course, you know, the novelist has the right to tell you what's going on inside the person's head. My job was to invent scenes that correspond to what he's able to tell you by telling you his thoughts, and that's always difficult. But also you're balancing an intimate love story and a very heartbreaking love story between two people with the metaphor, which is about Germany's infatuation with Nazism. Right. And it's, you know, the reason the book became this extraordinary success you refer to is that whereas there have been an awful lot of films and books about the Holocaust and about the Second World War, there have been very, very few about how the succeeding generation and how they had to live in the shadow of a great crime, which was not their fault, but in which they nevertheless felt implicated because their parents and their teachers and everybody they knew had been implicated.
Michael would have been, as an older person, would have felt implicated even if he had not had a relationship with Hannah?
Oh, I think so, yes. I think that generation will tell you that they had very, very complicated feelings about their parents because, you know,
How did you do this?
Yes, and so many things that their parents told them originally turned out not to be true. A lot of people were not being completely truthful about how they'd lived in those years. And so it was very hard to be a child of that generation. Bernhard Schlink is that age himself, the author of the book.
He's a lawyer and teaches law?
He teaches law both in Berlin and in New York. And he talks very powerfully about what it was like to be brought up in Heidelberg in the 1950s and gradually discover that the people you were living among were not telling you the truth about their own past.
Happened in France, too.
Yeah, sure.
Very much so. Tell me who Hannah is. I mean, what is clear about her is the passion for literature. And how central is that to something for you to grab hold to?
Well, the first thing I would say is that when Stephen and I first sat down and talked about the possibility of me playing Hannah Schmitz, I really thought, oh no, not me, no, because you're wrong, and I can't do that, you see, because I don't understand this character at all. I can't relate to her. I have really nothing that I can bring from my own life into playing this character.
You couldn't understand what about her?
Many things. I just, how do you relate to an illiterate woman who was an SS guard and served in Auschwitz? I mean, it's extremely difficult to do that. In comparison to some of the other roles I've played, I've always been able to, in some way, connect the dots and draw comparisons to experiences, or certainly similar experiences, in my own life, in my own past. And with this, I had nothing. So I always felt, OK, you're terrified, that's a good thing. Huge leap of faith. Just go in there and make her your own. It was very important for me, though, not to try and humanise her. I had to understand her, and I had to make her a person. You know, as Stephen brilliantly put yesterday, you know, the Holocaust was started by normal people. And it was very important for me to remember that in all my research and reading what I did and discovering what I learned about SS guards, you know, these were young men and women who really didn't know what it was that they were signing up for. And I had to think of Hannah as absolutely one of those people. And she was doing everything she could throughout her life to hide behind her illiteracy, doing anything she could not to be found out.
To guard that secret was the most important thing in her life.
It was the most important thing in her life. It informed absolutely everything she did. It's who she is. She wears it like a cloak. And she's ashamed of it, deeply ashamed, to the point that she accepts a life prison sentence over and above admitting in a courtroom that she can't read and write.
Now, why is that? Why is this notion that she is illiterate more overpowering than the notion she's been involved in one of the great genocidal acts in history?
I don't know whether she's actually, you know, at the moment that she agrees in the courtroom, that she actually says, I wrote the report, I think that she's not a character that can encompass all the consequences of that decision.
No.
I think she's doing something very simple, which is hiding the act as it happens.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's aware that the biggest problem really in that context is the fact that she's lying, which is not a happy place for this character to be in, unless it's to do with her illiteracy.
Yes.
But the idea that that would lead her to a 20-year jail sentence, I think, is not what she was expecting at the moment of saying that, actually, no, I wrote the report.
No, she just, you know, she didn't know what to do. I mean, she didn't know what else to do. All she knew was she had to guard her secret. She had to, you know, she just had to find, she had to find a way of not writing her name down on a piece of paper in public. She had protected herself against that for her whole entire life, and she couldn't let that happen now, not now, and as a consequence, she is sent to prison.
All right, before I'm going to come back to her, but you believe the Holocaust, you said last night, was started by ordinary people?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated issue. I think that in post-war Germany, when the Germans first started putting themselves on trial in their own courts, under their own laws, as opposed to Nuremberg trials, particularly at Frankfurt in the first big trial, the Auschwitz trial of 1963, there was a need, perhaps, or a sense that there was a need to demonize the individuals who are actually at Auschwitz. 8,000 people worked at Auschwitz. And only a very few have actually been convicted for murder.
Anybody who, the sort of definition goes, anybody who could be involved in this is a monster, and you're saying that they weren't necessarily monsters.
Well,
monsters. But I was thinking of the word, those who started it, well, much more the Eichmanns of the world rather than the guards.
We're talking about the levels of, you know, I think one of the things that Germany has had to come to terms with over the last however many generations is that actually millions of people were involved in the creation of the Holocaust, the maintenance of the Holocaust, and the machinery of murder.
And millions of people stood by knowing that unspeakable evils were being done and did not look the other way.
Exactly, and that's one of the great subjects of Mr. Schlink's novel, is that the perpetrators are not necessarily monsters, but actually they're also your, as David was saying, it's your parents and your teachers and your vicars. And how do you live in a society? How do you live in a post-genocidal society that's been through this? And most importantly, I think, for Mr. Schlink, how can you love? Does that invalidate the love? Does that mean that you can't love your parents? Does that mean everything your parents ever gave you is invalid? And how do you move forward? And how does that society move forward? Now, Germany has been, you know, is the only country in recent memory that's been through a genocide, but it's a country that's struggled and continues to struggle with the crimes of the past, and a generation that really felt they're born guilty. And I don't know, I would hope and expect as the generations go through that those stories continue to be told, but obviously the feeling of born guilty, it remains in Germany right now. But David could speak to
I want to speak to David, yes. First, how did you get this part? I mean, here you are with these extraordinary people, and what was the process of you coming to play Michael as a young man, and then Ray Fiennes playing Michael as a mature adult?
I did 2 German films before, and I think Stephen wanted a German actor. He was looking for a German boy, and I think he saw me in my first movie, and then I had a very long audition process, and I had to learn English because I could just talk in normal school English, and then he told me, by the way, I didn't tell you you got the part at some point.
So tell us about Michael. So here we know the story that opens when Michael is on a street suffering from whatever, and Hannah comes and sees him and helps him, and then he later comes back to visit her. What's going on with him and what does she mean to him? To Michael, the young Michael.
I think he's very, very fascinated by this woman, and he's very, it's interesting, and it's also a different. I mean, he's a middle-class boy from Germany, and he sees her home, which is new, and it's interesting, and it's new. It's a working-class home, and but that's not all. I mean, it's he really falls in love with this woman, and
she needs him.
Yes, she does.
That's an important part, is it not?
Yeah, one thing that I found myself saying in the last few days, just having the opportunity now to talk about the film, is that, you know, for me, this film is it's really a love story. It's really a love story. You know, a lot of people have been saying, you know, Holocaust movie and etc. For me, it's not that. It was never that at all. It's a story about how you can't choose who you fall in love with. And for me, the relationship between the two of them is very real, very pure, very tender, very genuine.
Hello. Hello. Excuse me. So what would you like to have?
What are you having?
You order. I'll have what you have.
2 frankfurters, 2 potato salads, and 2 beers, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope your mother was happy.
She enjoyed her meal very much.
You know, I think for both of them, neither of them experienced this level of intimacy with anyone. I think for both Michael and Hannah, and in Hannah's case, she hasn't been able to have relationships at all for fear that someone might say to her, "What do you want off the menu, darling?" I mean, she's had to protect herself. She's put walls around herself throughout her life, and to let someone in this way, to fall in love with somebody, is new. She hasn't felt these feelings before. And ultimately, yes, I think she does end up actually needing him probably more than he needs her.
It's a very difficult love story to write because, in a sense, you could say that usually in love stories, the two characters come together at the end. That's the expectation. Yeah. And in this one, the two, you know, he begins to resent very much the fact that he's responsible for her and that he is the only person left who is landed with responsibility for her when he has such complicated feelings about her. She has a much simpler attitude, which is that I think she still loves him and that she hopes that he's going to say when she comes out of prison, great. So,
well, does he love her?
He doesn't love her anymore, in my view, by the end. Because at the end, she is a responsibility that he doesn't know how to deal with. She's a weight on him. And so, because of that, it's a very unusual love story, and it completely confounds the normal expectation of an in quote, audience picture that the lovers will come together at the end. And so I had to balance that out, but I also had to balance out the fact that it's also a metaphor, and that the whole thing is working both as an intimate love story and as a metaphor for Germany's infatuation with Nazism. Right. The power of the book is the power of a fable. It's a very simple story. But like all very simple stories, the minute you begin to examine it, it becomes incredibly complicated.
What is the fascination with Nazism? Is it that it was so evil, the banality of evil? Is it that it was so successful for a while? What is it? Because there are television channels in America that show mostly films about Nazis.
Because it is a very exceptional project to set out to murder, successfully to murder 78% of a race. You know, 78% of European Jews were killed in the Second World War. And I think that in some way, you know, Bernard wanted the film made in English. He didn't want it to be a purely German film.
Right. It was his German accent.
It was his choice. No, but it was his choice that it should be played in the English language, not in the German language. Mm-hmm. And he wanted that, you know, so that the film would be seen all over the world and seen by cultures who maybe don't know about mid-20th century European history and who will actually learn about it for the first time, as well as in Germany. But also that it will resonate with other countries where there have been great ethnic crimes and where there is a process which we now call truth and reconciliation. That's now the name we give to that process.
It comes out of South Africa.
Yeah, but it's a modern name. Yeah. But what has gone on in Germany is at a level, truth and reconciliation, and that's what the film is about.
I think it's pretty amazing, just on that how it still works its way through the German culture is just the German parliament having to debate amongst themselves how German troops today performing in NATO, how they should be on active service or non-active service within Afghanistan. The idea of a German holding a gun is still a subject of debate within the German parliament.
I mean, my impression is with German's word, I mean, that there is now debate. I thought that debate had as much to do with the idea of putting them at risk in an adventure they was not that necessarily committed to.
Well, it's both, but actually, if you look at the nature of that debate and what happened in Parliament, is still, and how do we feel about Germans actually on this active duty in a war that we didn't quite believe in anyway?
Yeah. The relation between the two of you.
Yes, actually, talk about that.
Shall we?
I want to hear some more about that.
I want to come. You've worked together before?
Stephen taught me to act originally when I read to Israel and Palestine, and I came back and wanted to write something about it, and decided that I would have to perform it myself. Then Stephen was the man charged with teaching me to perform.
Well, this was like a one-man act on stage. Man.
Well, performance, not acting. It wasn't acting. I didn't have to pretend to not be myself. I wouldn't dare to do that.
You were reading your own words.
I wasn't reading. I'd learnt the words. Yeah. But it was Stephen who taught me to act, and as Kate will testify, it's a very intimate, it's a very intimate process being taught to act. If, like me, unlike Kate, you know absolutely nothing.
What's intimate about it?
Well, if you're playing yourself, then, as I was, then you have to construct your own character on stage, and so it's a naked process discussing who you are in front of somebody who, at that stage, I didn't know terribly well.
And do you have to construct it in a way?
That's true.
Do you have to construct it in a way you got to make sure that yourself is interesting?
Yes. And you actually construct a fictional version. I mean, the play was finally called Via Dolorosa, and we played it here in New York as we played it in London. And finally, I constructed a fictional version of myself, which Stephen helped create with me, really. It wasn't really me, but it was a version of me.
Yeah. What did you want to include in the screenplay that you couldn't include? Were there any debate about what was going to go into the screenplay between the two of you?
Many debates. And,
so many.
Many debates, and we'd spent a long time with Bernard Schlink, who wrote the novel. And the first thing we did, actually, is go to Heidelberg together with Bernard to... which is where the novel is set, and take a tour of the town. And Bernard could show you his classroom and where he lived, and surprisingly where he threw up on his way home from school. How much the novel is...
The opening scene.
Yes, how much of the novel is autobiographical is hard to know and hard for Mr. Schlink to say.
Well, what does he say if you ask him that?
Well, you would have to ask him that, because last time I asked him that, he won't say.
How autobiographical is this novel?
Every novel is autobiographical.
That's not a sufficient answer either.
No, but it's the truth. Of course, in every novel goes what we know, what we have experienced, because what we have experienced is something that we really know. And it never goes one-to-one into the novel.
I know everything you just said. I knew going in. I mean, obviously, all novels are autobiographical. They're based on composites. They're based on events. They shape you and what you know. Two, it's never one-to-one.
Yeah.
You know,
not even the autobiography is one-to-one.
Yeah. I mean, did you, in your experience as a young man, know someone like Hannah?
When I was later working as a student in a factory, I knew someone from whom I've taken some elements of Hannah. As I've taken other elements from other people I met and knew.
Did that story, that person, that conversation with her give you the idea to frame the story?
I never know what has come together when finally I know, oh, now I can write the novel or the story or whatever I'm about to write. It's a process that goes over a longer period of time, and I play with it, and I play with it until finally I come to the point where I feel now it's ready to be written. But I cannot then figure out, oh, this is the final or this is the first element that triggered it. It's a long process with many things coming together.
Did you then try to go out and understand Hannah and by talking to people like Hannah?
Well, I went even before. I mean, I went as a student. I went to this kind of trials, the trials after the big Auschwitz trial in Frankfurt. And I read a lot. I talked to people. And again, I think this is something that I share with many of my generation. We tried to understand how this could happen.
My question really, when I first became aware of the reader, was whether it was a literary device he used, because it brings them two together. The idea of her passion for literature, someone to read because she's illiterate, and that therefore it served, as a vehicle to get them attracted to each other. No,
I think it's a great and mysterious fable, and I think what you're talking about of it being a love story, and the elements in it are that's what I mean about the more you study it, the more complicated and ambiguous it becomes, and there's no element of calculation, and I think what's wonderful in the film, which is Stephen and Kate and David and Rafe's achievement, is there's no manipulation. There's absolutely no manipulation. The audience is left to judge for itself. I see so many movies where I'm being told what I'm meant to feel, and you can feel the filmmakers behind going, think this about her, think that about her. And what's wonderful about Kate's performance, Rafe's performance, David's performance, they're absolutely leaving you to judge.
Well, does the question of the guilt, some might ask this, the question of a generation after those people who perpetuated all these crimes, does that generation, is that question, that central question, overwhelmed by this love story?
I would say that the question of the guilt is at the center of the love story.
Yeah. It is at the center of the love story.
It's at the center of the love story.
Well, but they don't fall in love because of the guilt. They fall in love because...
No, but he feels he feels guilty for having loved her.
Well, that's later. But I mean, in the beginning, he falls in love not because he's guilty. He falls in love because she needs him. And
No, but as the story goes on, the story exactly parallels the story of Germany. In other words, they felt guilty about having had a romance with Nazism. It's exactly the same story. That's the power of the book.
Is the reading erotic in this film? Is what he does for her part of the eroticism of the relationship?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, actually. Not in its sort of basic terms. No, I don't think so. I think that it becomes erotic to her because of how compelling it is, and because how drawn in she is by him and by the reading, and how transported to other worlds she becomes as a result of listening to this beautiful, beautiful young man open her eyes and open her heart. Yes, and to open her mind to universes that she would not have access to at all if it were not for this meeting. So and that enhances the passion, enhances the love that she feels towards him, absolutely, if that answers the question.
The thing that intrigues me about this is why, two things. Number one, it is, where does this passion for literature come from? Is it just in her DNA? Is it just the nature of this person?
I think it is just, it's quite simple. I'm sure that David and Stephen can contribute as well. I think that she is just eternally fascinated and curious in the things about which she knows nothing.
Yeah, right.
It's as simple as that.
The other thing, just to add to that, is that one of the great problems for illiterate people is understanding the nature of past, present and future, which is why they tend to live in the present. One of the things that I think Hannah gets from literature is the concept of past, present and future. So the idea of narrative and how these narratives work it's not just the worlds, it's the concept of narrative structure into the world that she exists in. I don't think she has a particular concept of herself within her own narrative, her past, whether she was brought up, or indeed, when we meet her, the past and when she was working at Auschwitz, nor does she have a particular sense of herself in the future. Indeed, every time she gets a promotion, the anxiety about putting her into a situation where she might be discovered, she immediately moves on, and that's why she moves on from poor old Michael.
What is also interesting to me is that it was not something that came to her later after she got back and went through this horrific experience she'd had at the concentration camp. It was because she was there, engaged in that experience there. And so you might assume it's some way an escape for her if she had a deep awareness of how evil what she was about was
well,
about.
Again, it's also ambiguous in the. It's unknown, should I say, when we discover that when Michael is in the court and discovers that in fact she got girls to read to her, because she picked up the weak and the sick, and was she looking after them and preserving their life
in order they could serve her,
so that she could have time and they could read to her. But then she did, as they say, dispatch them. In the end, they were sent, presumably, to the gas chamber. So was it cruel or was it kind? We don't really know. But I think for the character of Michael, it's heartbreaking.
David, is there much? You are how old? How old are you?
18.
18. Do you and others that you know talk over your teenage years much about this Nazi experience? I mean, has it been a subject frequently for you in school or among your colleagues in the acting profession?
Yes, we are. Yeah,
even now?
Yeah, we're learning a lot about it in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's very good, and I think we have to keep learning and keep reading and keep remembering.
And what did you learn working with this group of people here at this table and others? I mean, did you walk out of this saying, wow, at 18 to have this experience with these talented people?
Yes, it was. I've learned so much, really. And,
about acting, about collaboration, about
film,
about film.
Yes, just by watching Kate or working with Stephen, because it was such a great, especially for an actor, I think it was very, very special.
One of the things I think was particularly wonderful for me to observe and experience through working with David is that he's so professional, you know, having had, well, it's true, it's really true, and that's, you know, you don't get that very often when you're a young actor or an actress coming at a big scary situation, like playing a lead in a feature film, for example. You don't really know what to do. The sense that you need to be willing to learn on the job and take advice from other people and be open to asking questions of yourself and listening to what other people are saying to you and observing. You know, it takes a certain type of person to be aware that that's important, and David was absolutely aware of that every single day, and it was really wonderful to see him change and grow, and I don't mean that to sound patronising. It was...
You watched him evolve
absolutely,
during the making of a film.
Yeah, and it was really fantastic to be a part of.
Let's see the two of you together. Here it is.
Say something in Latin.
Quos celestivitas aut codexteri septantuensis conditi. It's Horace.
It's wonderful.
Do you want some Greek? Menipion stroton oida peston, igode cano torte seratai.
It's beautiful.
How can you tell? How do you know when you've no idea what it means?
What are you studying in German?
I'm studying a play. You can read it.
I'd rather listen to you.
Tell me about that scene.
There was a pattern to their meetings, which changes at a certain point. Michael would come and visit. They'd had very little time to spend together. He was at school. He was taking time out of school to visit her, and they would make love, and then he would read to her. And at a certain point, Hannah decided, "You're going to read to me first, kid, then we make love," because that was more exciting to her. Guess what, everybody?
It was?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. I agree. They sort of, yeah. Don't you? Does everybody else?
Well, I don't know. Do we?
I think so.
Yeah.
I absolutely think
so. You sure?
So.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think that what you were both saying earlier, for both of them, the relationship is an awakening. It's an awakening for her because it opens up, you know, stuff she can learn about, and it's an awakening for him because, again, it's stuff he's learning about. He doesn't know anything about women. He's never had a relationship. He's eating and drinking it because he's learning.
And she's
so much.
eating and drinking the literature.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a massive ego boost for, you know, it's a massive ego boost for him
to do something that makes her so
Yeah.
Yes, and she pays. Yeah, he gets good at it. She pays him compliments.
He gets really good at it.
He does. She pays him compliments.
So would you, my
all the
friend.
Exactly true.
But but in that scene that we just saw, there's a moment you see Hannah pushes the book away.
Yeah.
I'd much rather listen to you. He doesn't know she can't read and write, and it was very important to us to not underline that in any way, so that for those people who may see the film and haven't read the book, they might realise in the moment during the trial, at the point that Michael realises, she can't read, she can't write. Our hope was that perhaps the audience would share that realisation in exactly the same moment.
The discovery will come at the same time.
Exactly.
Also, the thing is, you don't actually know who the reader is. You think the reader must be the boy, and then in the end, she learns to read herself. And who is the reader is one of the other great mysteries of the story.
Since you've already mentioned this, why does she kill herself?
I have to say, before I answer any questions like that I do hope the audience has their own and very diverse understanding of why she killed herself. I think that, from my point of view, it's not necessarily the only way of understanding it. I think there is a understanding when she finally meets Michael, comes to see her in prison, when she understands that the man that she does love and feels has given her this great gift and continues to give her the gift of these tapes, and then she learns to read and write. The impossibility of him continuing to love her, the impossibility of him continuing to look after her, is devastating. And I think she sees no future for herself outside of that jail. She sees no future for herself in a society where she will be automatically and profoundly condemned, whatever remorse she may or may not have. And so I think her only recourse is to take the books that she does have in her cell, make a stack of a pile, and stand on it and hang herself.
But it's more because that she recognizes she cannot escape her past than the fact that she has lost the thing she loved.
I think for me it's both. But
it's a combination.
I think we talked about this honestly endlessly, and even when we were shooting the scene between Rafe and myself, Rafe when he's playing the older Michael, right. I remember discussing it on that day, trying to figure out how soon after this meeting does she actually kill herself and why, and I think it is everything that Stephen says. It's a combination, really, I think, of both those things. And I think seeing the boy again, looking into his eyes, and seeing the light has gone out, I think that's the clincher.
When the film opens, you look at Michael, played by Rafe, and it just seems broken. He seems broken.
Well, I had to put the framework on because it's a first-person narrative.
Right.
In the book, it's quite clear why the book's been written. It's been written by Michael because after all these years, he wants to tell the secret. Right. And how does he tell the secret? He tells the secret by writing a book, and he discloses to the world. Now, there is nobody who ever disclosed a secret by making a film. We cannot assume Michael Berg directed the film. So I had to create a framework, which isn't really in the book, that the first person that he will ever tell this secret that has weighed down his life, the first person he will tell it to in any detail is going to be his daughter. Yeah. And so that frame I had to put on because otherwise there was no reason for the film to exist.
Creating this film, did you go to her first and then and she had reservations and then you went to Nicole and then she couldn't do it? Was there some...
Well, actually, I went to Kate first and she wasn't available.
Oh, she wasn't available. That's what it was. Oh, I thought it was the notion that you said earlier. You said, how can I do this? And,
oh, no, it was the fear that spurred me on, Charlie. It was the fear that spurred me on.
Oh, I see. The fear made you want to do it.
Yeah,
which is to know you, is to know...
Well, that's the great, that's one of the greatest privileges of being an actor is that you get to... force yourself to overcome those fears and, to be...
A fear would never stop you from taking on a part.
No, it's the thing that really, and I'm learning this more and more, actually. It's the one thing that I hope to feel is utterly terrified.
That I can inhabit this character.
Well, you just know that the mountain's bigger, The mountain that you have to climb is much, much bigger if you're terrified of what you're going to find at the top. And hopefully you find some extraordinary things along the way. It just makes the job so much more interesting. But in the first instance, no, I wasn't available.
Yeah. And then... Nicole couldn't do it because she was pregnant, I guess,
I went
and then you come back.
Friend Nicole, and then, in fact, Nicole couldn't do it because she got pregnant, and that's fantastic. But I was very lucky enough that then Kate did become available. Yeah. So it was my
David,
great joy.
Do you have fear when you
Oh, yes.
Creating.
Isn't it good to know that I get just as terrified
Yeah, I mean, it must be
as you?
it's very comforting to know. What was difficult about directing this film?
Gosh, I don't know.
How many hours have you got, Charlie?
How many hours? There was many challenges. I mean, the emotional calibration of the character of Hannah we spent a lot of time on and discussed at great length. I'm
interested. I mean, it's fascinating how much, when I'll say something, you'll say, we talked about this a lot. Why did you commit suicide? All these questions.
That was the thing. Maybe I'm completely interrupting, but, you know, the rehearsal process, there was no beginning and no end to the rehearsal process. I mean, there really wasn't. You know, we started by saying, OK, we're going to rehearse. We'll sit down in a room, around a table, let's discuss everything. We'd sometimes get things up on its feet, move things around, see how they felt, change things, etc., etc. But it just didn't stop. I mean, when we got to Berlin and I started filming, because I came a little bit after everybody else, we'd talk after work. As soon as we'd wrap, we'd be talking again. We'd work on the weekends. It just kept going. And we would take as much time out of any day as we needed to make sure that something was fully thought through, fully prepped, rehearsed and staged, so that we all felt confident that we were on the same page. And that was absolutely down to Stephen. And for us as actors, you know, to say that it was a safety net is a huge understatement. You know, we felt absolutely looked after. And you know, Stephen is an extraordinary team leader and wants everybody to be involved, you know, so it never felt as though us as actors were in an exclusive little corner with the director. Everybody was involved somehow. I feel like the props department had things to say about our characters that were tremendously helpful. I mean, they really were.
Let me see another scene. I'll come back with my question.
For a moment, he was still inside her.
This is disgusting. Where did you get this?
Borrowed it from someone at school.
Well, you should be ashamed. Go on.
You're leaning in watching that. Just tell me what you're seeing, thinking, looking at. That scene.
He's reading, they're in the bath, obviously, and he's reading an excerpt from Lady Chatterley's Lover, and I remember being so shocked when David and Stephen came up with the idea to do that. I said, isn't that risky, or why, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? But of course...
Why that book?
Why that book? And of course, the truth is, what I love about that scene so much is that there is some part of Hannah that is repulsed to hear sex described in this way, because to her, the intimate relationship that she has with Michael is not in any way repulsive or salacious like that. It's tender and real and beautiful and born out of real emotions. And so I think it is quite funny to see her, you know, be absolutely horrified at the descriptions of sex. I love the irony of that.
Is there anything different between this being a woman who's older? Does that create any kind of anything? The idea this is an older woman and a younger man. A teenager, not just a younger man.
Well, for Mr. Schling, it's vital to the story because there has to be a generational difference between a boy born essentially after the war.
And he wants the lead character to be a woman, Hannah. And we believe this is because Mr. Schling, this is autobiographical.
No, I think it's to his purpose to talk about the nature of post-war German guilt. It has to be a generational difference. You have to have an older lady and a boy.
Yeah. Okay. Should we say anything about all these wonderful nude scenes?
I don't know, do you want to?
Sure, of course. Tell me what we say about it.
Oh, you want me to say
Yes.
Okay. What can we say about it? Well, it's, you know, as we were saying, it's a love story. These are two people in love. These are two people discovering what it feels like to feel those emotions, number one. And it's a sexual awakening for both of them.
For both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, you know, to me, it isn't pornographic, it isn't manipulative. It's everything I said, you know, it's real and tender and very, very beautiful. And the truth is, it's in the beginning of the story. It's it's in our first act of three. So you don't see these, it's not a sex romp, shall we say.
Why does he protect her secret?
Later in the trial? Oh,
Did you need to know that to play the? Well, by that time, Rafe is playing it, but
I think in preparation of the film, I asked myself, what would I do? Would I do something? And I think I couldn't answer it. I don't know. I don't really know. I think he feels very hurt. I think he feels very, very hurt
when he learns about her
that she read.
But at the same time, he protects her secret that she can't read. He protects her secret. He doesn't immediately tell everybody. Yes.
Do you understand fully the question?
Simple question, yes.
Sometimes it's
ask the question better for me.
Sometimes it's simply a language thing.
Ask it better for me.
No, what Charlie's asking is.
I will sagen.
In the moment during the trial, when you talk to Bruno's character, you know, when you express to him that you know something about one of the defendants and that the information that you have is favourable to her case, but you choose not to tell the judge, you choose not to deal with that situation. Charlie's interested in your feeling of why do you think he protects her? Why? It's knowing how ashamed she is of the fact that she's illiterate is the reason why, right? Yeah.
Okay, because she knows it's because of his love for her.
Yes, and also the fact that
knowing that it is so devastating for her, he wants to respect her fear.
Absolutely, yes? Absolutely, and respect her. Yes, it's exactly that.
You went from Revolutionary Road to this, right? That was the order of filming?
Yep.
This has got to be great for a young actress like you, yes?
Yes.
I mean this is phenomenal material. This is a great film.
I know.
And so is Revolutionary Road.
Frank, I have had the most wonderful idea. I've been thinking about it all day.
Baby, what's all this about?
Do you know how much money we have saved? Enough to live on for 6 months without you earning another dime. And with the money we could get from the house and the car, longer than that.
What we could get for the house? Sweetheart, what are you talking about? Where are we going to live?
Paris.
What?
You always said it was the only place you'd ever been that you wanted to go back to, the only place that was worth living. So why don't we go there?
You're serious?
Yes. What's stopping us?
What's stopping us? Well, I could think of a number of different things. For example, what kind of a job could I possibly get?
You won't be getting any kind of a job. Because I will.
Oh, right.
Don't laugh at me. Listen a minute. Do you know what they pay for secretarial positions in government agencies in Europe?
No, I don't.
Listen, Frank, I'm serious about this. Do you think I'm kidding or something?
Okay, I just have a couple of questions is all. For one thing, what exactly am I supposed to be doing while you're out earning all this money?
But don't you see? That's the whole idea. You'll be doing what you should have been allowed to do 7 years ago. You'll have time. For the first time in your life, you'll have time to find out what it is that you actually want to do. And when you figure it out, you'll have the time and the freedom to start doing it.
You know, it's interesting actually doing press for both of these films now and having the opportunity to talk about these experiences, which were both so special. But I also feel like having the opportunity to talk about what they meant to me and these incredible characters. It's sort of therapy in a way. It's kind of like the shedding of both of those roles. In particular, Hannah, because we only finished shooting the film in July of this year. It has been the most pivotal 18 months of my acting life. Absolutely.
Have you seen Revolutionary Road as well?
I haven't yet, I'm afraid.
Here's what's interesting. I assume, Roger, I assume this is good news to you. You are endlessly fascinated by Hannah. And so in Revolutionary Road, the character you play there too. But you are endlessly fascinated by her. You know, and how you construct that, and whether it's a screenplay or whether it's the way you have moved the characters is, I guess that's what craft is all about.
You are endlessly fascinated by her, but also partly because of Kate's extraordinary performance.
Yes.
About a very, very careful how much sympathy you go for and how you get repelled by the character and then how she brings you back. And it's an extraordinary emotional roller coaster, primarily, I think, due to Kate's astonishing performance in the role.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to have you here.